Welcome along to another episode of the Play On podcast. I'm David Simmons. It's all things Scottish football on another Monday night here on the Play On podcast. As always, I'm joined by Anthony Brown and Stephen Commons. Stay tuned for the next hour as we look back on the weekend's Scottish football in action, the highlights and the key talking points. On this week's show, we're discussing, is Tommy the right man to save Killie? There you go. There's a cheesy headline for you. So we want to hear from you guys. As always, we're fully live and interactive for the next hour, so feel free to drop us any messages, any views, any conversation starters that you want to raise, bring to the table and get involved. Don't forget, if you're watching via YouTube, please head over and subscribe in the bottom corner to the State of Mind YouTube page. It'd be gladly appreciated. And if you get on over to Twitter as well and follow the Play On podcast. Right, guys, it's been a busy weekend, not as busy as normal. There's not been any major real talking points, but there has been a new manager appointment at Killie. Like we say, is Tommy Wright the right man to save Killie? Anthony Brown, what do you think?
Yes, I think he is. When we were discussing it last week, I think that I said that my first choice would be Tommy Wright, second choice would be Stephen Robinson, third choice would be Gary Holt. So I think, to be honest, if you're looking for the safe, obvious, logical choice, you don't look beyond Tommy Wright in this instance. I understand Stephen Robinson's claims because he's done well at Motherwell, but Tommy Wright is perfectly suited to Kilmarnock at the minute in the sense that he's not just had a couple of good years at St Johnstone, he's had a sustained period of success at St Johnstone in terms of having them punching above their weight, to the point where I think a lot of St Johnstone fans probably got fed up finishing in mid-table. They were almost getting, as soon as it slipped remotely close to 7th or 8th, the knives came out in some quarters, probably in a minority for Tommy Wright because he'd set such a high bar in terms of finishing in the top 6 regularly, winning the Scottish Cup and just generally making St Johnstone an established Premier League club. So I think, obviously his first challenge at Kilmarnock is to keep them in the division. And I think, given that they're 10th just now and Ross County and Hamilton both seem to be, or particularly Ross County look to be struggling. Hamilton obviously picked up a good result yesterday, but generally have been struggling. I think there's a good chance that Kilmarnock will certainly ease their relegation worries in the next few months. I think Tommy Wright's just got to be careful that Terry Butcher at Hibs is the absolute cautionary tale of this scenario of a manager going in with a good reputation to a team that shouldn't get relegated but ends up getting relegated because he was maybe a bit too much ripping it all up and wanting to change too much too soon. I think Tommy's just got to go in and be as pragmatic as possible, look at what he's got available to him, get the players coming with him. He doesn't want to go alienating people, calling everybody out for underperforming and things like that, because then you could lose the dressing room pretty early. There will be players he wants to get out. There will be things he wants to do in the summer. But right now, his main priority is just to get the current squad functioning as well as it can and try and get a tune out of them enough to go on a little run, get themselves away from this relegation trouble that they've drifted into over the past few months, or over the course of the season, really, because to be honest, Kilmarnock have not performed for long periods of this season. So I think he's absolutely the right candidate to be. If it fails, it won't be one where you could turn around and say that was a stupid appointment. It'll be just because something's gone awry, which happens from time to time. Some managers are just not suited to certain clubs. But I think if you wanted the safest possible option, I think Kilmarnock have got it.
Stephen, last week when we mentioned about Alex Dyer's departure at Kilmarnock, you said exactly the same as Anthony. You were backing Tommy Wright to go straight in. I take it you replicate exactly what Anthony just said there, mate, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was the logical appointment, really. I think he's got a background of working with not a great budget. He's not going to require big names to go in and sort of turn things around. He's used to probably working with guys who are good, honest pros, which I think Killie have a lot of. And the good thing that he's got, I mean, there's good sides and bad sides to his situation, really. That the bad side is that they're in a terrible run at the moment. I think they've got 2 wins in 13 or something. So they're a team really, really low in confidence. But you haven't heard, like, Alex Dyer left, and I think a lot of the players, like, nobody spoke out against him. Nobody's really seemed to be rebelling against him. So there doesn't seem to be like a bad dressing room there. It seems to be quite a decent group of guys. And there isn't a massive difference between the group that Steve Clarke had and the group now. So Tommy Wright will be looking at that and hoping that he can go in there and sort of get the best out of what are. I mean, there's still the bones of a good squad there. There's still the bones of some good players, and he should have enough to get himself out of the situation they're in, and then obviously regroup in the summer, get rid of as Anthony said, the guys that he potentially doesn't rate or doesn't want there, and go out and be able to get some guys that he maybe has been looking at in the time that he's been out of football, to potentially strengthen in areas that Killie need it. So yeah, I think it's a good appointment for them. It's one that you would hope that, if you're a Killie fan, you would hope that they could kind of get the managerial bounce that other teams seem to have got since they've replaced their managers.
Yeah, that's it, because like you say, Ross County, Yogi came in, he started to see a bit of a reaction from that same squad, getting a bit of points on the board. Is that what Killie need now, that fresh face in the dugout, Anthony, just to give the players maybe a clean slate to start over and start putting points on the board?
Yeah, I think it has to be the right fresh face first and foremost, but I think Tommy Wright, as we've just discussed, is the right fresh face. But certainly their previous two appointments have just not worked. They brought in Alessio, a little bit of a left field gamble after Steve Clark left, and it was a bit of a disaster really. It didn't really happen for him, and there was suggestions of players not being with him and things like that. Alex Dyer, it just never really sparked for him at all. It didn't really. He just seemed like an assistant manager who had been promoted to manager, and it just didn't really have the feel of anything substantial emerging from it. I mean, it didn't really. You could never imagine Kilmarnock going back into the top six under Alex Dyer. It just didn't. There was never a feeling that things were going to take off. There wasn't that same vibe that they had under Steve Clark. So now I think they've gone to a manager who's, in many ways, like Steve Clark. Not in terms of having. Obviously, Clark had probably a better CV in terms of having come from England. But I would say Steve Clark and Tommy Wright have probably got similarities in terms of their principles and the way they go about their business, in terms of being pragmatic guys who there's no airs and graces about them, no frills, no fancy technical talk, if you like. And they're just, I don't want to do them a disservice, but they're guys who will call a spade, and they should make their instructions pretty easy for players to understand. And so yeah, I mean, the fresh face is the sort of guy I would think players are going to want to play for, and if they're in a bit of a rut, I'm sure he is the sort of guy who knows what's required to get them playing with a little bit of bounce, a little bit of swagger. And as Stephen said, you look at the Kilmarnock squad, there's a lot of guys still there. I mean, a decent chunk of guys who thrived under Steve Clark. Power, Dicker, McKenzie, Burke, even Malumbu's still there. So if you can find a way of getting the best out of those guys again, getting them back to a level that they were operating at a couple of seasons ago, and get the big problem they've had is scoring goals. They need to get the strikers scoring. So I think Tommy Wright's the best candidate to go in there and try and spark something. And the main thing is they're not bottom of the league. They're not cut to that. Although they're probably in a relegation battle, I think even looking at it now, you would probably say they're unlikely to get relegated. The situation they're in just now, there are other teams that look in a worse predicament, and I would say Ross County at the moment, as much as they've had a couple of good wins under John Hughes, they're starting to regress again. They're starting to look a bit ropey, and Hamilton are one of those teams that are going to go on little runs where they don't win any games and they'll pick up the odd point here and there. But you're now starting to wonder, are Hamilton going to have enough about them to get ahead of, because Kilmarnock and Motherwell are two pretty established teams. So it would be a big shock if either of those two were to get relegated. So if I was to pick the bottom two, I would go with the current bottom two, Hamilton and Ross County. Which order it is, I don't know, but I would guess those two will end up the bottom two, and that's largely because I think Tommy Wright will have enough about him to pull Kilmarnock away from that zone.
Yeah, well, time will soon tell. I think he's a great appointment as well, guys. One other manager that's obviously struggling, Stephen, is Aberdeen manager Derek McInnes. He says he does not fear for his future after defeat at Hibs left his side with just one win in the last 8 matches in the Scottish Premiership. It had been suggested that during the week that a defeat at Easter Road would spell the end of McInnes' near 8-year spell at Aberdeen, slipping now 5 points behind their rivals for third spot. It's not really helping his cause, mate, is it?
No, it's not. We've discussed this many times. He's been in your Sugarly Peg club for a couple of months now, at least. So, the noise around Derek McInnes from the Aberdeen fans and from the kind of people in the know in the northeast, it doesn't sound great for him at the moment. I think the more things are kind of going the wrong way, the more the fans are beginning to kind of buy into the noise that surrounds it. So, I mean, going to Easter Road and winning was never a given anyway. I mean, I don't think anybody expected them to go there and win, but for his own sake and to kind of keep that noise that we're talking about down, he really needed to go there and put in a performance at the very least. And although in his post-match interview he said, "Oh yeah, I think we matched Hibs all over the park, and I think we did really well." I mean, from what I saw in the highlights, that is pie in the sky. That is nonsense, because I think Hibs absolutely dominated them from start to finish. I think Hibs were much stronger all over the park. I do feel sorry for Derek McInnes, because, as we've touched on many times, if you look at the consistency that guy's had over the last 7-8 years, you would kill for that. I mean, Hibs are in third place just now, and Anthony will know the stats a lot better than I do, but if they finish third this season, it's only something like the third time in 20 years that they finished third place in the league.
Yeah, no, sorry to interrupt there, Stephen. Yeah, Anthony, you tweeted something at the weekend, didn't you, which did tell Hibs' stats, and this is something like their best start in a long time, isn't it? Sorry to put you on the spot if you can't remember, but you did tweet something.
It's Hibs. If Hibs finish third this year, it'll be the first time they've finished third since 2005. So that's 16 years ago, and it's also, they're currently on their best run of points up to this stage since 2001. So they're on their highest points tally at the 28 game mark in 20 years, and they're on course for third place for the first time since 2005. So that gives you an idea of the amount of the level of consistency that Derek McInnes has had, because I think most people looking at it if you're looking at it impartially, you would say Aberdeen, Hearts and Hibs are all of relatively similar stature. The three clubs are all similar size. All these supporters will debate, our club's the biggest, we've got the biggest support, we've got the bigger history and all that. But the bottom line is those three teams are the big city clubs. They're all the same size. You could make an argument that Dundee United are of a similar calibre as well. And when you compare what Aberdeen under Derek McInnes have done over the last 7 years, they've routinely finished top 3, top 2, top 4. Hibs have barely been in the top 4 in the last 20 years. Hearts have barely been in the top 4 in the last 10 years. Aberdeen have never been out of the top 4 since Derek McInnes came in. So that's the bit where I find it hard to accept that this is the time up for Derek McInnes. I do acknowledge that he's on a sugary peg, as you would put it, and it is starting to look like his time's up, because the fact of the matter is, modern day football, your shelf life is a lot less than it would have been in 20, 30 years ago, when Alex Ferguson and Wenger got so much time to build these massive dynasties almost, where they were in charge for years. I don't think you'll ever see that again, no matter how good a manager is. Fans get bored too easily.
Do you not think that emphasises kind of the... if that is what the point is, and if it is the fact that the Aberdeen fans are basically just getting bored of Derek McInnes' tactics, the way he's running the team, the fact that they're kind of in this no man's land between the top two and the rest, that I just don't like. You need to, again, I'm not sitting here on a pedestal saying everyone needs to learn from me because I'm the best football fan in the world, but I support a club who, as you quite rightly say, consider themselves to be on a par with Aberdeen, like battling it out for third place. If we had the level of consistency that Aberdeen have had over the last 4 or 5 years, over the last across McInnes' tenure, across McInnes' whole tenure, then I would be absolutely over the moon with that. That's fine with me. But the argument that I have with Aberdeen supporters that I know is that, despite the fact I say that to them, like, look at Hearts and Hibs are like a roller coaster. They're up and down, up and down. You guys are just level. We would love that consistency, but what they say is, but when the Hearts and Hibs are on their up, they get trophies. They win things. They have moments. They have
I'm
great
not sure
times.
They do though. I'm not. Look at Hearts haven't won a cup for nearly 10 years. Hibs have won one cup since 2007. The Aberdeen have won one cup, and Aberdeen have won one cup. Hearts have won one cup. Hibs have won one cup. Dundee United's last cup was in 2010. So what's that? 11 years ago. it's not like other clubs are out there winning loads of trophies and finishing third and fourth all the time. Like, Aberdeen,
I agree.
there must be an element of Aberdeen fans comparing themselves against Rangers, which is totally unrealistic. There was that period where Rangers came up, where Aberdeen were slightly better than them, but that was never going to last because Rangers have got too much money. Rangers were always going to overtake Aberdeen at some point. So I think there's possibly an element of, we used to finish second under Derek McInnes when Rangers weren't in the league. Rangers have just overtaken Aberdeen and gone into the distance, which, let's be honest,
that surely cannot be the narrative though, because that's pathetic. If you're an Aberdeen fan or any supporter of a club, a provisional, a sort of semi-provisional club, then you cannot expect to compete with these guys. Like, look at the wage budgets they have. Like, you basically, if you finish best of the rest, it's almost like winning the league in Scotland. Like, that's always been the case. You finish third, you get European football, you get a couple of games in Europe, you maybe win a trophy now and then. That's all you can really hope for. And I mean, that's a stinging indictment of Scottish football, really. But that's the way it is, and the way it's always been in our lifetime.
Absolutely. I think Aberdeen fans have just had it so good for so long, they've now taken it for granted. And that's the danger, that it's all very well, I accept they've probably got bored. I understand why they've got bored, because I don't watch Aberdeen every week, but by all accounts, the football is a hard watch at times. But the fact is, it's generally winning football. I know he's not winning in the last couple of months, I accept that, but generally he's produced winning football with various different groups of players, and sometimes it's not always, well, by all accounts, it's not been great for a couple of years. It's been a bit turgid at times. I mean, I've seen them against Hearts and Hibs a lot, and to be honest, I've never really come away in the last few years thinking they're a great Aberdeen team. They would win games against Hearts and Hibs, but I'd never come away thinking they were brilliant. They were far superior to Hearts or Hibs. But the fact is, they were beating Hearts and Hibs, who are, as I said, the two teams I would argue they should generally be comparing against. And the counter argument to that is that Hearts and Hibs have not generally been in great shape themselves for the past 10 years. But I would argue that Hearts have had a lot of resource over the last 5 years. They've brought in a lot of good players and have not been able to get anywhere close to what Aberdeen are at. Likewise, Hibs had real momentum when they came out of the Championship and looked like they were going to kick on, but they've still not finished ahead of Aberdeen. They possibly will this season. But if finishing fourth is a reason to get rid of a manager like Derek McInnes, I accept that's the way football's going now, where fans just want so much. They want everything. If you finish third, they demand you win a cup. On top of that, if you're finishing third regularly, it's time to go and win a cup. But winning a cup's, it's not easy. Otherwise,
it's a lottery. Yeah.
Aberdeen got to lots of finals, and how often did they come up, or semi-finals under Derek McInnes? And they were beaten by Brendan Rodgers' Celtic. I mean, there's no shame in that. That's not.
So was everybody else. Everybody else was beaten by Brendan Rodgers' Celtic as well. So, as you say, you can't judge them on those games.
Even when you look at their other cup exits, it's not like Aberdeen have been notorious in the past for going out to lower league teams like Stenhousemuir. I'm sure they've lost to East Fife, Queen of the South in the past. But you look at their recent cup exits, they're losing to Premier League teams. They lost at Hearts last year. Aberdeen can always lose to Hearts, no matter what predicament Hearts are in. Hearts raise their game against Aberdeen the same way they do against Hibs and Rangers and Celtic generally. Aberdeen can lose to any Premiership team on their day. They're not that far ahead of everybody whereby they can fancy their chances and think we can go to St Johnstone and turn them over. That's just unrealistic. I think there's an expectation that Aberdeen should be always finishing third, and I don't know what it is. I can't relate to this. They should be doing better this season. I accept that. They should be doing it better this season. But to suddenly say...
You can't put yourself in the mindset of an entire supporter group, though. I'm the same as you. I cannot get my head round why there's such an outcry against them. But it isn't just... This isn't just one or two guys. Like, we laughingly sort of said, oh, it's just one idiot that pulled the spare sheet off the bed in the spare room and wrote Derek out. But that is not the case. Like, there is a growing... Like, again, it was people who... As I said, I think a couple of weeks ago, that before the majority would have been like, well, if he goes, fair enough, then we'll get someone else in. But now I think it's beginning to turn a wee bit to, no, we actually think he should go now. The one thing I would say though in that whole situation is, if Aberdeen do pull the trigger and they go, right, that's fine, we'll get rid of him at the end of the season, say, where do they go next? Where do they go that's a guarantee that they're going to push on and get better?
That's the thing. If you look at the percentages here, the chances of them getting better in the years ahead, unless they really push the boat out and go big,
which they're not going to do. Financially, they can't do that.
They're not going to do that. So unless they really go big, or unless they just happen to get a guy in who just happens to be the right fit. I don't know. Stephen Robinson perhaps might be one, but he's got no track record of managing a club as big as Aberdeen. And Aberdeen have a habit of going for Motherwell managers. They went for Mark McGee and Craig Brown before Derek McInnes. And obviously Derek McInnes was another manager who came from that sort of mid-section of the Scottish League to join Hearts. So to join Aberdeen, sorry. So it's not beyond possibility they would look at Stephen Robinson as a candidate if they were going to replace McInnes in the next couple of weeks. But would you hang your hat on somebody like Stephen Robinson guaranteeing even top four for Aberdeen? I wouldn't. I mean, the history tells you that there is no guarantees that Aberdeen, Hearts, Hibs, Dundee United, just because they spend a wee bit more money than St Mirren, Kilmarnock, Motherwell, you only have to look at the league table over the last 20 years to see that Hearts, Hibs, Aberdeen, Dundee United Aberdeen pre-McInnes have generally struggled to get in the top four. Yeah. So the likelihood is, if Aberdeen get rid of McInnes, they will probably drop to that mid-table section that Hearts and Hibs, Hearts found themselves relegated. So there's a cautionary tale for you as well of what can go wrong if you make the wrong appointment. So let's not pretend that whoever comes in is suddenly going to make Aberdeen better. There's a possibility that could happen. But the reality is Aberdeen are probably going to find themselves in that sort of mid-section that Hibs and Dundee United and just that merry-go-round almost of you finish in the top four maybe once every 2 or 3 seasons. That's the likelihood. They've had it so good with McInnes. I think they've taken it for granted, and I know there'll be Aberdeen fans watching this shouting, "You don't have to watch that crap every week." But how you decipher a football match? Everyone's different in how they view a football match. If I'm a supporter, I just want my team to win. I don't care how they play. And Aberdeen have won a hell of a lot more games than they've lost under McInnes. This
is the thing, like the purists, the football purists that just want the team to play attractive football will see how happy they are when the team finishes 6th or 7th next season, but they're playing great football every week. Like,
arguably the best football Hearts have played was under Daniel Sendel, and they got relegated.
Good point. Yeah, so to knock this one on the head with Derek McInnes, because I've just been sitting back and letting you two roll with that one. We all decided as a collective that Tommy Wright is the right man at Killie. Just to wrap it up, going forward, is Derek McInnes the right man to remain in charge at Aberdeen at the moment, Stephen?
I mean, in my opinion, yes, but I don't think he will. I don't think
Anthony?
He will.
I agree. I would keep McInnes, but at the same time, it's now reached a stage where it's getting a wee bit toxic among the supporter base, where it's going to force the board to make a decision, I think, because even if McInnes is the right man.
I think it's an easy out for the board as well, because the board are probably looking to cut costs. They've been bleating for months and months about how much money they've lost.
I heard a rumour today, Stephen, they're losing about $1 million a month.
Yeah, that's what, according to Dave Cormack, and he's been quite open about that since the start of the lockdown. What the point I keep making is, I can't see how it's possible that Aberdeen could be losing more money than anyone else. Like, what is happening differently there than is happening at every other club? Did they have less people take up the season ticket options? Like, I don't understand how they could be losing substantially more money than the likes of Hibs.
They're paying big wages, though. I think their wage bill is bigger than Hearts and Hibs. But even
so, Dundee United. Dundee United are paying massive money. Like we've discussed that before. That I just think that it's an easy out for Dave Cormack if they are losing money hand over fist, and they've got comfortably the third highest paid manager in Scotland. They could get him off the books and bring in somebody cheaper, and they won't face a massive backlash for the fans.
Yeah, obviously one manager that is still flying, even though he did suffer his first defeat at the weekend, is David Martindale. He was awarded today the Manager of the Month for January award, and his striker Scott Robinson was awarded the Player of the Month award. 2 very well deserved accolades there, Anthony, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I don't think there's any surprise about both of those guys getting those awards. Martindale's, we've spoken about him every week since he became the manager, basically. I mean, incredible start to his reign, and I hope that defeat doesn't prove to be like a signal for him to suddenly unravel and get found out almost. I think everybody's bought into this David Martindale story and has really enjoyed this. It's almost been a fairy tale in terms of where he's come from and what he's done over the past 3-4 months. So I hope that defeat just suddenly doesn't cause the wheels to come off and they end up dropping back down into the bottom 6 and getting embroiled in a relegation battle or anything like that, because it's probably been the best sort of feel-good story of the season, I think. And Scott Robinson, I mentioned him a few weeks ago. I'm absolutely delighted for the guy. Really good guy. I got to know him quite well when he was at Hearts, and things just didn't quite happen for him at Hearts. I think when he moved on, he was quite unlucky. He was playing in central midfield as a sitting midfielder, which he did a job there, but he never really excelled. And I think there was a feeling that he's not doing enough to justify his position here. And Hearts obviously brought in Gomez and Bobbin at that time. Robinson got himself sent off in pre-season, which caused a suspension at the start of that season. Couldn't get back in the team, and then he just fizzled out, lost his way a little bit. He's moved to Kilmarnock, didn't work out, and so he dropped down the divisions. And he's totally rebranded himself, come back as a little striker who runs in behind. And I saw something on Twitter the other day there from Hearts supporters saying, was Scott Robinson one that got away? I don't think you could say he was one that got away, because it's not like he's gone on to the English Premier League or what have you. But I think there's certainly a case to be made for, you could say he would probably be an asset to Hearts as a out-and-out striker running off Liam Boyce at the minute, because the amount of times Liam Boyce plays these little flicks and tries to knock balls in behind, Scott Robinson's the perfect player to run onto those sort of things. So I think he would certainly be an asset to Hearts at the moment as a striker, but I think it would be too strong to say he's one that got away, because he's not emphatically proved them wrong or anything like that. But certainly it's fantastic to see him doing well and getting these goals and leading the Livingston attack.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Stephen, that's a dress rehearsal for the cup final that's coming up on the 28th of February, where it finished Livingston 1, St Johnstone 2. That's a psychological boost, I think, for Martindale going into the final, knowing that will he be classed as the underdog now, if you like, after going down 2-1 at the weekend?
I mean, you could look at it two ways. I mean, could you look at it and say Callum Davidson will be saying to these guys, well, listen, they were high flying. They were supposedly the most informed team in Scotland, and we've just gone and derailed them. So there's no reason why we can't do it again on the biggest stage that a lot of you guys will probably ever play in. But then alternatively, as you say, David Martindale could definitely use that to his advantage, because if they had continued to go on this run, even if they'd just got draws and scrappy wins right up until the cup final, they would have gone on as stone cold favourites. And the underdog tag, I think, suits them better. The whole setup of the team, the fact that most of the players are guys who have at some point in their career been told you're not good enough, you're not going to make it here. They've dropped down and come back. David Martindale himself, I think, has been well documented and well discussed on his story. So I think being the underdog massively suits his style of management and the style of team that they have more than if they were going in there as favourites. But that said, I don't think that's going to come into it. It will just be 90 minutes of tactical decisions by the managers and who wants it more on the day. I think both teams have got good players. Both teams have got experienced campaigners and exciting young players as well. So I think it'll be a really good game, to be honest. Like I didn't think I would ever hear myself say that about a St Johnstone Livingston game, but I think it will be a good final, because I think both teams will be quite evenly matched, and there's nobody really going in there as a huge underdog or a huge favourite. So I think it will be a good game, and I think I'm going to put it out there right now. I think St Johnstone will win.
You think so? Anthony, are you in agreement with that, or do you think Martindale's going to get a bit of silverware this season?
I think I'm starting to edge towards St Johnstone as well. I think no real logic to it. I think it's a flip of a coin match. I think it is a flip of a coin match. They're two very, very evenly matched teams. I think Livingston would have only gone in favourites on the basis of their recent form, not because they're a superior team overall. So I think, honestly, especially with St Johnstone winning at the weekend there, I think it's a flip of a coin match, and I'd be inclined to go just my gut feeling veers towards St Johnstone for this one.
The captain of St Johnstone is for EH26 as well, mate, so that's why I'm backing them. Go on, Jason Kerr.
I'm going to do a bit of a cross-show promotion here. I do another podcast on a State of Mind Media. I am hopefully going to be catching up with David Martindale. Well, I say hopefully, it's booked in the diary unless he pulls out. We're going to be speaking to him on Wednesday, and that'll be going out on a State of Mind's YouTube channel on Friday night on the Salt and Sauce Chat Show. If you want to get daily notifications and free daily content, click on the subscribe button underneath there if you've not already done so. Right, that's that shameless plug out the way. Let's have a look at the results from the weekend. We'll start off at New Douglas Park yesterday, where it finished Hamilton Accies 1, Rangers 1. A 94th minute equaliser from Ross Callaghan earned the bottom of the table side a valued 1 point, but Stephen, it was quite an evenly matched game. Did you watch it? I think Hamilton maybe deserved the point, if not more.
I'll be honest with you, it wasn't an evenly matched game at all. I thought Hamilton were the much better team. I thought Hamilton were great. I thought they were really good. But the big story will be that Rangers falter. But at the same time, when you say that they faltered, they still got a point. It's not like they've kind of thrown it away. But I think if I was a Celtic fan, or if I would be quite encouraged by that, because if you actually look at it forensically on Rangers' last probably 5 or 6 performances, other than I think they beat Ross County 5-0 during one of the midweeks. Other than that, I think they've really struggled in some of the games. They've won 1-0, scrappy wins. They drew at Motherwell. So I think if Celtic had been a lot more on the ball, they would have potentially been able to take advantage of that. But I just think the narrative around Rangers and the way that Rangers have been playing of recent weeks, if that had been Celtic, there would have been a lot more negativity thrown towards them. But because Rangers had so much kind of goodwill and good faith in the bank amongst their own fans and the larger Scottish football fraternity, I think that it kind of went a little bit unnoticed, the sort of poor performances and the kind of drop off and the standards at Rangers over the last couple of weeks. But alternatively, I think if I was a Rangers fan right now, I would have been really buoyed by the reaction of some of the players after the game. Not just what they've said in the media, but the way that you could see how angry they were. Like, see, when Celtic have lost games this season, you watch the players and they walk off the park like scornful children, like they like children that have had a row. They're walking off, heads hung low. The Rangers, like, they were just wanting to go fighting with each other. They looked like they were absolutely furious, especially Alan McGregor. I mean, Alan McGregor said in his post-match press conference that they were rubbish. Like, he was just outright. And I think Ryan Kent's been in the media today basically saying that that's not acceptable for a Rangers team to perform at that level, which if I was a Rangers fan, I'd be very encouraged by hearing those sort of comments when you compare that to what's happened on the other side of the city. But listen, they're still undefeated, they're still unbeaten. I don't think it really changes a massive amount. But if this poor run of form continues, then Celtic might smell blood. It might be too little, too late. But I was speaking to a very well-informed, in-the-know Celtic fan either yesterday, I think it was, and he made a great point that I never even thought about. So this whole Dubai debacle, if you like, that we were talking about a few weeks back now, they came back off that. It just didn't really perform. Dropped, 3 games in a row? It's 9 points they dropped there. They've got 2 games in hand over Rangers still, haven't they, Celtic? Am I right? Am I maybe misquoted on that? Still 2 games, yeah.
So there you go. So if you think if that whole Dubai situation never happened, all that bad press, all that nonsense, and they picked up the 9, it's all ifs and buts, guys. But if they got the 9 points here, the 2 games in hand, and then this starts to happen, the likes is slipping up at New Douglas Park, and then suddenly there's a little bit. It's all ifs and buts, but I could see exactly where it was coming from that, and I thought it was a great point.
This all the way through that Rangers situation, as much as they've just kind of got the head down with it and got on with it, the amount of times that Celtic have slipped up either the day before or like slight, so that they're never ever putting the pressure on Rangers. Rangers players, as we said right at the start, have never been in a situation where, like the majority of the squad, I think Stephen Davis, Alan McGregor, have been out in front and they know what it's like to lead the pack in a league chase. But the rest of these guys don't. So if you put a bit of pressure on them and Celtic win the day before, win on the Friday night or the Saturday morning or the Saturday afternoon, and Rangers play on the Sunday, like, who knows? The results may have still been the same. Rangers may have still won all those games, but the pressure on those guys changes completely. The sort of situation around the games changes completely. But I just think Celtic have let them off the hook so many times. Like, Rangers players know that they have still gone out and got those results, but they've known that they've got that little bit of a sort of safety net, because if they lose this game, well, Celtic lost yesterday anyway. It's exactly the same as when they drew with Motherwell. Well, Celtic had drawn the day before, so they never lost anything out in the title race. It was, it is all ifs and buts.
Exactly, mate. Since we've been doing this podcast this season, there's not been many weekends, Anthony, that we can say that Celtic took all 3 points and Rangers dropped, is there? Not this year anyway.
There's not been many weeks where Celtic haven't topped the bill in terms of the discussion points.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite a rarity for them not to be the headline. But I think that's Neil Lennon needs wins. I mean, how much of a difference it's going to make at the end of the day in terms of whether he can salvage his job, I don't know. But he's had a couple of decent wins there against Kilmarnock and Motherwell. If he can get on a run, then there will always be people who've already made their mind up and there's no turning them. But if he can somehow get on a run and win every game between now and the end of the season pretty much, which is not beyond possibility, if he can get the right vibe in the dressing room and just get a bit of confidence going and a bit of continuity, it might just be enough to swing a lot of fans back to wall and earn him a reprieve almost. I mean, that's all he'll be thinking in his head. If I can show something between now and the end of the season, try and get the critics off my back and just calm things down a wee bit. I think that's all Celtic can do at the moment, unless they're actually going to change the manager, which is looking increasingly unlikely.
Yeah, it's not looking like that's going to happen. I mean, we're now into February. Celtic won back-to-back games at the weekend for the first time since December, beating Motherwell at home 2-1. Welsh scored in the second minute, Edward in the 50th, but it was a bit of a nervy finish when Campbell got a goal back in the 66th minute. Did you see any of the highlights from that one, Stephen?
I did, yeah. I mean, again, I think Motherwell had a chance right at literally the last kick of the ball that Laxalt cleared off the line, and it could have been the same old story all over again. But I think that would have been pretty harsh on Celtic because I think they were pretty good on Saturday. I think they dominated the majority of the game. It was the first time, I think, certainly in the last few months, that I've watched highlights of a Celtic game and thought they look really comfortable here. And although the Motherwell goal was really fortuitous, it took a massive deflection. But if Motherwell had smash and grabbed that at the last minute, I mean, that the whole story, the whole sort of feeling around the result changes because nobody would have cared that they had played well. It was all about the 3 points. But alternatively, you shouldn't take that away from Neil Lennon and his team either. Like they've gone and got a good result. And I think that's, as Anthony quite rightly said, that's all that Neil Lennon can do. All that Neil Lennon can do at this moment in time is continue to try and grind with the players and get them to get 3 points every single game that they play. And if they do that, who knows what happens? The rest of it takes care of itself. If they do that and Rangers still win the league, then fair play. But they have to. That's what the aim has to be, that they have to go and try and win every single match.
Yeah, I mean, we've touched on this a bit, Anthony, already. Obviously, Derek McInnes' situation at Aberdeen and obviously the run that Hibs are now on. But it did finish at Easter Road, Hibs 2, Aberdeen 0. It was a double from Boyle, one from the spot. Do you think they can secure the third place now in the league?
Yeah, I think they can. I'm not saying they will because I would not write Aberdeen and Derek McInnes off. He's shown so many times before when his back's against the wall that he can come back and come again. And I wouldn't totally... They've still got the game in hand. If they win that, it's down to 2 points. So you certainly couldn't say it's a foregone conclusion that Hibs are going to finish third, but they put themselves in a really good position. And I think the thing that plays into Hibs' favour at the moment is you look at the fixtures, they don't have Rangers or Celtic to play before the split. They've got a run of games against teams that every one of the games, I mean, Aberdeen at home was probably the one on paper that you thought, oh, they might slip up there. But the rest of the games on paper, they will go in as favourites to win. And with the consistency they've shown generally this season, you wouldn't bet against them winning every game. They are showing that level of consistency. They're not outstanding to watch. You wouldn't look at Hibs and say they're an absolutely brilliant team. Or they've not got any real major defining features where you think they're unstoppable, but they're functioning very well this season. They're generally speaking defending well, and generally speaking they're scoring goals. They've obviously had games where those things have not happened and they've looked a bit chaotic at times, such as the semi-final against St Johnstone. But generally in the league, they're beating most teams they would be expected to beat, particularly away from home. They've got Ross County coming up, and I mean, you'd be surprised if Hibs didn't win that. It's not a gimme by any stretch because they're...
But Ross County beat them at home. Ross County.
I know.
So this is the thing. Like, I know what you're saying. That if you do look at it statistically, you break it down statistically, this is the best Hibs performances like up until this point, 28 games for a long, long time. But they are still capable. This is probably the most frustrating thing for Hibs fans and for Jack Ross is that they show so many decent performances, and then they'll just go and throw a random one, they drew with St Johnstone at home in a game that they dominated. They got beat by Ross County. I understand that Hibs are no the level of players that Hibs have, and they're never going to be a win at every single week. But I just think they are, in my eyes, the best of the rest. Like they every time I've seen Hibs this year, other than the cup defeat, I think, to St Johnstone and the cup defeat to Hearts, every other time I've watched them or seen highlights of their games, they look really good. They look decent. Like, as you say, not world beaters, not a team that you would go, wow. Like, there has been Hibs teams in the past that you think, oh Jesus, this is going to be a few years of domination here. But I just think that they're a workman-like team. They're a good, honest bunch of pros that go out and kind of give their all for the manager. And I just think that'll stand them in good stead. But as you say, if Aberdeen win their game in hand, Aberdeen have beat them home and away already this season. There's nothing to say that they can't rediscover that sort of early form that they had in the league, Aberdeen, and kind of kickstart again and get back to. But I just think it's the ball's now in Hibs' court, and it's in their hands. If they really want to kind of drive it home, I think they've got the potential to do that.
I think the thing that's been really impressive about Hibs is they were getting absolutely slaughtered after the semi-final defeat by St Johnstone. There's been plenty of Hibs teams of the past. They suffer a defeat like that, the fans turn, the critics come out, and they just capitulate, and you don't see them again for the rest of the season. That's them on a bad run, and they end up slipping down. I'm going back to probably Fenland's time in charge. He had them in the top six, and they were top of the league at one point in November, and then they were still comfortable top six around the turn of the year. And then they suffered a couple of setbacks and they completely imploded and ended up finishing in the bottom six. I think that was in 2013. And there was a wee feeling that the way the vibe was 2 weeks ago after that St Johnstone game, I really thought Hibs could really lose their way here. Like there's people are calling for the manager's head and things like that. And it felt like they could really go under.
This is probably one of the positive times that there hasn't been fans in the stadium when it comes to stuff like that. It's given Jack Ross he's given him the opportunity to say to these guys, forget the noise that you're hearing in the background, go out and perform. And they're going out there on a Saturday and they're no hearing the grumbles for the stand. They're literally just going out and getting on with their job. They're hearing the manager's message and they're just getting on with it. That's potentially one of the times where you have had a small positive about there being no fans in the stadium.
St Mirren away, that's the one last week where they won, was it 2-1? That really said a lot to me about Hibs. I mean, that's one of the games you'll look back at in years to come and say, oh, they won 2-1 at St Mirren, that's routine, that's to be expected. But that's when your team's in the doldrums, I know they'd won against Dundee United before that, so they'd sort of ease the pressure a wee bit. But St Mirren have been on really good form. We were raving about them last week or the week before about how well they're going, and everybody's raving about Jim Goodwin just now. Hibs have gone there, they were in 1-2-1 at a time when Hibs were under the cosh. So that says a lot about where they're at in terms of their mentality, the ability they've got to withstand pressure and just stand up, and all these cliches about resilience and standing up and being counted and that. And it's not a big win in the context of people are not going to remember it for months and years to come, but it just said a lot to me about this Hibs team's got a bit about it. It might not be the most eye-catching Hibs team there's ever been, but that's a good win. That's the sort of team that better Hibs teams might have almost found the pressure too much, gone there and got turned over. So
what you need to remember is that St Mirren are Hibs feeder team, so they didn't want to go upsetting anybody. So.
Ooh, Stephen, naughty. We've already touched on this game a little bit. At the Tony Macaroni Arena, it finished Livingston 1, St Johnstone 2. Tanser scored in the first half. Rooney, just after the break as well, put St Johnstone 2-0 up, and Pittman got a goal back 7 minutes away from time. It was obviously David Martindale's first defeat, which we've touched on. Moving on, at Ross County, up at Ross County in Dingwall, it finished Ross County 0, Dundee United 2. Shanklin and Edwards got the goal. That is a very much needed win for Mickey Mellon, isn't it, Anthony?
Yeah, big win. He was coming under it. There's always a manager coming under it or getting out of a sticky spot every week. It just seems to be the way football is these days, and like everybody, it's not just a team in trouble, it's a manager's future almost being discussed after 2 or 3 bad results.
By the way, sorry to interrupt, but have you noticed that in this podcast, right, we put managers in the Shugley Peg Club and we discuss the folk who are under pressure. See all the managers that have been fired this season. I reckon about 90% of them have been fired last. Not even mentioning the fact that they're under pressure.
That's it.
No, that was a big one for him because I follow a lot of Dundee United related people on social media, and you could see there was a lot of people very pissed off after the defeat to Hibs. And who was it? Was it St Mirren beat them 5-1 a couple of weeks ago? I mean, they were two bad results, particularly St Mirren one, obviously. And that's the sort of result that is going to be hard for him to almost shake off, if you like, because Dundee United don't often lose by that sort of scoreline to St Mirren. So he's really needed a victory. And I mean, that it wasn't a spectacular victory by any stretch, but it was a pretty comprehensive one. And Shanklin getting his goal as well, that'll do him the world of good because he's not been firing this season compared to what he has been in previous seasons. And I think Mellon's, he's had a pretty underwhelming start, I would say, to his reign, but equally, I think most Dundee United fans realistically would have probably taken going into the Premiership and not being embroiled in a relegation battle as a decent achievement. There will be some who think we're Dundee United, we should be going for top four or whatever. I think the reality is if Dundee United can keep themselves in the league and keep themselves well away from the relegation battle, it's a decent season. But I think definitely with the money they've spent and the reputation Mellon has, I think Dundee United fans are probably entitled to expect a bit more going forward if he can ride out this little storm that he's almost had to endure over the past couple of weeks. But they're in that sort of area where their fans probably a few weeks ago were thinking we could push on and maybe push Livingston, Hibs, Aberdeen, try and catch one of those teams. But now their target has just got to be to try and catch St Mirren and get back into the top six. And there's no guarantee they're going to do that because St Mirren have got games in hand. So I think it's for Mellon, it's just the rest of the season is just almost damage limitation. Try and avoid getting dragged into that relegation battle and pick up a few wins, try and sneak back into the top six. I think as long as they avoid that relegation battle, I think it can go down as a satisfactory season for Dundee United.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that win at the weekend obviously ended an 8-game winless run for Dundee United. Much needed points indeed. We talked about this earlier when we were discussing the Tommy Wright situation at Kilmarnock. Bringing in a new face can obviously revitalise players that have maybe been going through a bit of bad form. Yogi came in at Ross County. You got the reaction you wanted from the players, Stephen. Is the honeymoon period maybe over for him now? Is that what we're starting to see with results?
Nah, I don't think so. I just think that when you're going into a team like Ross County, these are the sort of results you're going to get. You're going to get inconsistencies. He's not a miracle worker. Like the thing is, he's a good coach, and he's obviously trying in quite a short period of time to sort of change the mentality of the team and the way they play and kind of the style of play that they've got. Because I think I said this a couple of weeks ago. I watched them under Kettlewell, and they were just like industrial. They were just getting on with the job, trying to kind of win their 50-50s, win their battles. And then when I saw them under John Hughes, they were trying to pop the ball, and I just think that you can't. That doesn't happen overnight. That's long hours and hours of work on the training ground. But John Hughes is not stupid. He's not going to go in and try and do what Daniel Stendhal did at Hearts and just try and change a team from being a long ball Jannies to trying to play like Brazil 78 squad in a couple of weeks. It just doesn't work like that. So he's pragmatic enough to kind of try and play when it's on and not when it's not. So results like this are going to happen because, quite frankly, the Ross County squad are just not really that good enough. But I still think that they've got enough in them to push the likes of Killie and Motherwell. Maybe not. I just think that John Hughes gives them a much better chance than most other managers would in that situation. But I still think he's got it well within his powers to kind of see them safe.
Yep, other game obviously in Paisley, it was St Mirren 2, Kilmarnock 0. Obviously we know that Kilmarnock's now appointed Tommy Wright as the new gaffer. St Mirren manager Jim Goodwin, he's targeting 3 more points, starting with champion Celtic on Wednesday. Could they cause another upset, do you think, against Celtic, Anthony? Let's say upset, but St Mirren are flying.
They could cause an upset. I'm not sure they will. I think Celtic have found a wee bit of form. I would fancy Celtic to win that, actually. I'm not convinced they will, because obviously Celtic have been so erratic this season, so unconvincing. But I think I think Celtic are starting to find something. I think you might find they go on a little run now.
Yep.
3-0 Celtic. There you go.
Yeah.
There's a prediction.
You want to put one on it, Anthony? What do you think the score will be?
Aye, I'll go for that as well, actually. I think Celtic will start motoring and it will be too little too late, but it'll be enough for Neil Lennon to argue that he could keep his job. Not that I'm saying he should keep his job, but it will give him something to cling on to.
Yeah. If we look into the Championship, we'll start on Friday night. It was on the telly. Hearts ground out a victory over Ayr United at windswept Somerset Park to continue their relentless march towards the Scottish Championship title. Leon Boyce got the second half penalty. Where do we start with this one, Stephen? It wasn't a great game though, mate, was it?
Listen, one of my good friends, Neil Hunter, I think he watches this, and every single week, I mean, Hearts have been pretty poor in a lot of games this season. Every week he'll text me at the end of the game and just say, 3 points and down the road, mate. That is exactly what that is the attitude that Hearts have to have. 3 points and get the hell out of here. Like, that is exactly, especially in places like Somerset Park. To be fair, Ayr United are very good at Somerset Park as well. I don't think they had lost for over a year at home. So it's not an easy place to go. It's a bit like when we went to Arbroath at the start of the season. It was blowing a gale. I mean, Andy Halliday's hair looked like it was about to fly off at any given second.
I've been to Arbroath too many times.
Aye, I know, mate. You live up there for a while, no? But no, listen. It's one of those games. It's not going to live long in the memory of Hearts fans anywhere. But it's a vital 3 points. I think Anthony touched on this a few weeks ago, that the reason Hearts will comfortably win this league is not because they're absolutely swashbuckling and battering teams right, left and centre. It's because everybody else in the league are so inconsistent that they're taking points off each other here and there. So I just think, yeah, we are the most consistent team. We've got the best group of players and probably the most experienced group of players that are in that league as well. So it's hopefully just a case of ticking games off now between now and the end of the season.
Was it a penalty, Anthony? Was it a penalty?
Probably not, but they probably should have had one in the first half, so I wouldn't make too big a deal of that. And I know it's not necessarily the way it should work, but I think I wouldn't focus too much on that, given that they probably should have had one in the first half. But I actually thought Hearts played okay. When you factor in the conditions, I thought you look around, I always look at individually, did he play well, did he do all right? Factor in the conditions, I didn't think there were any bad performance for Hearts. I thought they were, Pescu had a couple of ropey moments, Craig Gordon had a ropey moment, but generally I thought Hearts were pretty good considering the circumstances. I mean, the Nanjuli, I think, was a little bit disappointing in terms of his overall contribution, but at the same time he looked lively enough. He just didn't get any real quality service, and it wasn't a night for players looking good as such. It was just a night for, did they do their job, did they stand up to the challenges, and I think all the Hearts players did over the course of the night. And as Stephen says, it's about getting I get a wee bit fed up with people rambling on about style of play and all that. I accept that at the top end of football there's got to be an expectation to play. When you get to Man City level, English Premier League, there has to be an expectation that you're entertaining people. But see, it's Scottish football level. Like, I just think it's so hard for any manager to create a circumstance where their team is absolutely exhilarating to watch and capable of winning football matches. If your team's brilliant to watch, the chances are they're losing loads of goals because they're playing out from the back and taking loads of risks, and they're going to lose loads of goals. A bit like Kilmarnock under Kenny Shields. They used to be really good to watch. I think they finished mid-table and maybe even bottom six because they were so determined to play out from the back. Danny Lennon's St Mirren were another example of a team that were determined to play football, but they never did anything in terms of where they actually finished in the league. It's so hard to play high, sophisticated football on a Scottish football budget, unless you're Rangers or Celtic. It's just so hard, and every team gets it. Aberdeen have been battering Derek McInnes for the perceived lack of style in his football. Robbie Nielsen's had it, Craig Levine's had it. Daniel Stendhal, as we touched on, actually got a style of football and looked like he was capable of doing something. But he wasn't winning football matches consistently. No. He was drawing games 3-3. He was scoring lots of goals, but conceding lots of goals because it's so hard. You need to have real quality ball-playing centre-backs, ball-playing full-backs that are comfortable, a ball-playing goalkeeper. And it's so hard to get that on a Scottish football budget, where you can bring them all together and get them all comfortable, and dealing with the noise from the crowd. When a Scottish football crowd panics when you start playing across the back, it's so hard to do. So inevitably, the default setting of a Scottish football team, manager, players is generally just get into the opposition half as early as you can and try and play from there. And that's not always necessarily easy on the eye. You have to appreciate, though, if your team's winning, scoring goals, that's what entertainment is about. And at the moment, Hearts are doing that every week pretty much, with the odd exception.
Absolutely. Stephen, there's a nice feel-good story coming out of Tynecastle just now to do with the virtual tickets for the Hearts game against Inverness. Callie, you're a season ticket holder at Hearts. Do you want to explain what's happening here?
I'm also a ticket holder for Inverness, Caledonian Thistle as well.
There you go. So what's the story behind this then, if anybody watching doesn't quite know?
So basically, if you wanted a story to sum up the pettiness of Scottish football, right, this is potentially one for you, right? So in the summer, Hearts, listen, everyone will have their opinion on it, right? But my opinion as a Hearts fan is Hearts got screwed royally by pretty much the entirety of Scottish football. They tried their best to sort of say, listen, guys, this isn't fair. This isn't fair on Hearts, Partick Thistle, Stranraer. And one of the only teams that stood shoulder to shoulder with us during that entire thing and basically backed Hearts throughout the entirety of kind of what was going on was Inverness, Caley, Thistle. So when the season was all ratified and Hearts were relegated, there was loads of chat on social media from Hearts fans basically saying, listen, we're not going to be allowed into grounds, but every team are going to sell. If we were allowed in grounds, we wouldn't be taking up away
like a boycott.
Boycott, basically, yeah. So every team obviously offers an online facility, and not many Hearts fans have taken up the online packages from opposing teams. Let's just put it that way. I think a lot of them have been acquiring it through other means. But Inverness, Caledonian Thistle were, as I say, were the one team that stood by Hearts. So what happened was the Foundation of Hearts, which is obviously the official sort of fundraising part of the supporters, they went to Caley directly and said, right, listen, our fans want to back you guys. Can we do something to kind of help you out? So what they decided to do is sell tickets for obviously the game, which is fans will not be allowed to go into.
So virtual tickets.
Virtual tickets. They decided to sell £5 for a ticket or £10 if you want one signed by the manager, John Robertson, who's obviously a Hearts legend.
Yeah.
And at this moment in time, 6,000 Hearts fans have signed up to these virtual tickets. So listen, it is a feel-good story. It's a story of Hearts fans standing by the people who stood by us during the summer. And I think if it helps Inverness in any way, shape or form, and I think it will, because they're getting money for nothing, because the game's live on BBC. It's like they wouldn't even be selling an online package to people. They would have got no money from this game whatsoever. But their record ever attendance is 7,588, and that's the target now for Hearts, is to get the record attendance for Caley Thistle to be a game that no one attends.
That's brilliant, superb. Right, so if we quickly flash through some of the other results in the Championship, it finished Arbroath 2, Dunfermline 0. Are Dunfermline going on a bit of a slippery slope, Anthony, do you think?
Not a slippery slope as such, because they smashed their local rivals 4-1 last Wednesday, but certainly they seem to have lost their consistency that they had earlier in the season. Their form's not been great overall recently. So, I mean, Dunfermline, Dundee, Wraith Rovers, they're the three teams you would expect to be in the playoffs, unless Inverness can capitalise on their games in hand. Because you look at league table, they're the one team that you think, how are they not in with the pack? And then you realise
they've only played like 8 games. It's like
they've got all these games in hand.
Since November, aye.
Ordinarily, you'd expect Inverness to be in there with Dundee and Dunfermline and Wraith Rovers, who are obviously punching above their weight a little bit. But the way things are shaping up now, it's looking like Dunfermline, Dundee and Wraith will be the three teams in the playoff mix. And as we sort of touched on last week, it's all about going in with a bit of positivity and momentum, and I suppose that's what those three teams and Inverness, if they happen to be the team that makes a late surge, all these teams are trying to get themselves into that position where they go into the playoffs in second place, so they've got a slightly better chance with who they face, and so that they've got a bit of just positive energy going into the playoffs for whatever that happens to be worth. So Dunfermline they'll be mindful of the fact they've not won a lot of games recently, and it will be a slight concern for some of their supporters, because I think Dunfermline and Dundee in particular are two teams that will be feeling we need to get back in the Premier League. We need to, in the Premiership rather, because they've been out of it. Certainly Dunfermline have been out for a good while now, and Dundee have spent quite a bit of money, so they'll feel they need to get back in on that basis. For Wraith Rovers, it's maybe a little bit more of a bonus because they got promoted from League One last year and didn't even necessarily win the league because it was obviously ended early, so there's slightly less pressure on them. But I think with Dunfermline, Dundee and Inverness, if they can get themselves in the mix, there's a real, I suppose, pressure in a financial sense to try and get up to the Premiership as soon as possible, and this is an opportunity for at least one of them to get in there.
Yeah, I mean, other results of the weekend: the Dundee Inverness Killie Thistle was postponed due to a waterlogged pitch. Greenock Morton 0, Wraith Rovers 1, good 3 points for Wraith. Alloa finished 2-1 against Queen of the South. Now there is some big games coming up this week. On Wednesday we've got fixtures. It'll be Kilmarnock against Motherwell, 6 o'clock. That'll be Tommy Wright's first game in charge for the club. We've got Livingston against Hamilton Accies and St Mirren at home against Celtic. On Saturday it's Aberdeen St Mirren, Dundee United Livingston, Motherwell Hamilton Accies. Put my teeth in. Motherwell Hamilton Accies, Rangers Kilmarnock and Ross County Hibs. And on Sunday it is St Johnstone at home against Celtic with a midday kick-off. Now just before we conclude things, because we are just running a couple of seconds over the hour mark, there was an announcement today that I just want to quickly speak to you guys briefly about. We found out today that football fans are probably not going to be allowed back inside stadiums in Scotland until next season. Now this all comes after Professor Jason Leach confirmed that will be some time yet before sports events are going to be allowing fans back into the stands. I'm going to be honest, guys, I kind of predicted that anyway. Is that what you guys thought as well, the way the country's going? The way that the whole world's going?
I didn't expect it. Like, when I signed up for my Hearts season ticket at the start of the season, I did not for a minute think that I would be in a football stadium this season. Like, I don't know whether other people did. I mean, maybe other people were a lot more sort of ambitious than I was, but I just didn't see any way that would be possible. And I think, as much as I can understand the reasoning for him coming out and sort of clarifying that at this moment in time, just to kind of say, listen, guys, just in case anyone's of any doubt here, this is the situation. I just find it a bit poor that they're giving no light at the end of the tunnel for stuff like this. Like, how are clubs supposed to try and sell season tickets next year? Like, it's a lot of clubs rely on this money. I mean, and you can say what you want. Hearts fans will blindly put their hand in their pocket and they will blindly buy another season ticket. I can pretty much guarantee that Hearts season ticket numbers will be the same as they were this year. Hibs probably the same. Rangers and Celtic for definite. Celtic maybe because of the situation with the club might be. But if that all gets sorted out, Celtic fans in their droves will take the season tickets. Every other club out with that will be toiling because they, especially the lower leagues, the lower league clubs, without their season ticket money, how are they going to survive? Seriously. And they've done, I mean, we talked about this again a couple of months ago, that up until now, no club has gone out of business. And I just think that is incredible that that's happened. But
hopefully it remains that way.
Yeah, they're not going to get another government grant next year. So they're going to have to think of something else, some other way of kind of spreading the wealth.
Anthony, last word from you. We touched on this before we went live. Obviously, Hampden are meant to be holding 2 games, I think it is, for the Euros. 3 games, sorry, for the Euros in the summer. How will this announcement from Professor Jason Leach, where he says he can't see any fans until next season, how do you think that's going to affect those fixtures at Hampden Park?
Well, the last indication we had regarding the Euros was that home supporters would still be allowed in, potentially in small numbers. So, for instance, in the Scotland-Croatia game, you might have, I don't know, 10%, 20% of the capacity, whatever that would be, 10,000, no, 5,000. So there might be scope for a UEFA event to pull that off, depending what the situation is in March, April, May, with regard to the virus. But I mean, I think it's safe to say we aren't going to have full houses at the Euros. Best case you can hope for is that you can maybe get 10,000 fans in the stadiums, or a certain percentage of the capacities of each stadium, because obviously some stadiums elsewhere in Europe will be bigger than Hampden, so you might be able to get 15, 20, I mean Wembley for instance, you might be able to get 10, 15,000 people in there. But I think it's safe to say we aren't going to have full houses at the Euros, which is a real shame, especially from a Scottish perspective, considering we've qualified and we've not been at a tournament since 1998, so that's a bit of a sporting travesty, I guess.
Yeah, I want to say a big hi as well to, like, say, Ian, who's been in touch on the comments. Hi to Paul as well. We've had loads of comments coming in. Sorry if I haven't had enough time to put them all on. It's been quite a busy show. Hi to David Kelly. Hi to Joseph as well. There's a guy, Andy Cleland. Thank you for your message. And I'm just going to wrap up the show very quickly by saying hi to this guy here, who has just jumped off my screen. Hi to Michael, who's listening to the show from South Africa. So we do appreciate you joining in, Michael. Guys, that's the end of the show. We're going to do it all again same time next week at 6:30 for another edition of the Play On podcast. On behalf of myself, David Simmons, Anthony Brown and Stephen Commons, have yourself a great week, and we'll see you next Monday at the same time here on A State of Mind. Thank you.